Hey, welcome! So, when you picture a desert, what's the first thing that pops into your head? I'm guessing it's just endless waves of sand, right? Well, today we're going to completely shatter that image. We're going to dig into the incredible science, the hidden life, and the absolutely ingenious civilizations that have learned to thrive in some of the most challenging places on our planet. Let's jump right in. Okay, here's our game plan. We'll start on the ground, looking at the different faces of the desert. Then we're going to zoom way out to see the massive atmospheric engine that actually creates these landscapes. After that, we'll dive right back in to find those little islands of life we call oases, discover the one incredible tree that makes it all possible, and finally, take a look at how these ancient worlds are dealing with the pressures of today. All right, first step, faces of the desert. It's time to go way beyond that classic postcard image. So, let's get right to it. Is a desert really just a whole lot of sand? The short answer, nope, not even close. That classic sandy desert you're thinking of is just one of several very different types, and each one tells its own story. It all actually starts with what's called a rock desert. Out there, the temperature swings are just wild, scorching hot during the day and then freezing cold at night. This causes the rocks to expand and contract over and over again until they literally shatter themselves apart. That process is called physical weathering. Then the wind comes along and acts like a giant broom, sweeping away all the smallest, lightest particles. What's left behind is a gravel desert, or a sear. And all that fine sands the wind carried off, when it finally settles, that's when you get the iconic sand desert, the erg. Oh, and a wadi? Think of it as a ghost river, a dry riverbed that explodes with water and life only when those super rare rains decide to show up. So, you gotta ask, what kind of force is powerful enough to shatter solid rock and literally move entire landscapes? To get that, we need to zoom out and look at our planet's invisible engine, the global wind machine. The whole thing really boils down to two key ideas. First, you've got your high-pressure area. Just picture cool, dense air sinking and pressing down on the Earth's surface. The key thing to remember is this sinking air is very dry. And then you have the exact opposite. A low-pressure area. This is where warm, light air rises up, and it often carries a lot of moisture with it. Now, here is the absolute crucial point. Nature is always trying to find balance, so air is constantly on the move, flowing from those high-pressure spots to the low-pressure spots to try and even things out. And that powerful movement of air, well, that's what we call wind. Simple as that. So let's put it all together on a massive global scale. Around the tropics, you've got this cool air constantly sinking, creating a permanent belt of high pressure. At the same time, right at the equator, the intense sun is heating the air up, causing it to rise and form a zone of low pressure. That air rushing from the tropical highs down to the equatorial low creates what we know as the trade winds. And that constantly descending super dry air in those high pressure belts, that is exactly why the world's biggest deserts are located right where they are. It's a giant planetary system. Okay, so we've seen this massive, powerful system that creates dryness. But now let's zoom right back into the heart of the desert itself, because we need to talk about the exceptions, the little pockets of defiance, the incredible islands of life we call oases. An oasis is basically a miracle. It's a fertile spot in the middle of all that dryness where water, the desert's most valuable treasure, manages to make it to the surface. It could be from a river or from deep underground, but that access to water is what makes everything possible. It's what allows plants to grow and people to build entire communities. What's really fascinating is how these oases get their water. There are a few different ways. You've got a spring oasis, where the water might have come from rain that fell hundreds of miles away and traveled underground for years. Then there's a groundwater oasis, which depends on wells that tap into moisture from the very rare local rainstorms. An artesian oasis is where water is trapped in an underground basin, and the natural pressure is so great it forces the water all the way up to the surface on its own. And finally, you have the river oasis, which gets its water from what's called a foreign river, a river that starts somewhere much rainier and is powerful enough to flow right through the desert. Okay, so you have water, that's step one. But how do you use that precious resource to build an entire civilization from scratch? Well, people in oases perfected their way of life around one single miraculous plant, what they call the tree of life. They came up with this absolutely brilliant technique called story cropping. It's like a 3-level apartment building for plants. On the top floor, you have the tall date palms, which create a canopy of shade. Living below them are fruit trees, which are protected from the harshest sun. And down on the ground floor, in the coolest and most sheltered layer, you have vegetables and grains. The setup is just genius because it dramatically cuts down on how much water evaporates, protecting the soil and making every single drop count. And the star of that whole system? It's the date palm. I mean, look at this. This thing isn't just a tree, it's a one-stop shop, it's a desert supermarket. The fruit gives you food, syrup, even flour. The pits are used for animal feed. The wood becomes building material and fuel. The fibers get woven into strong ropes, and the fronds are used for roofing, mats, you name it. You can even make honey, spirits, and wine from different parts of the tree. It is, without a doubt, the absolute cornerstone of life in the oasis. But you know, these ancient, self-sufficient worlds, they aren't so isolated anymore. For our final section, let's take a look at what happens when tradition collides with the modern world in these oases in transition. You can really see the stark contrast here. The traditional way of life was this beautiful balance. Farmers in the oasis would trade their crops for things like milk and meat from nomads who lived in the surrounding desert. Everything moved by camel caravan. But today, settlements are getting bigger and bigger. Buses and trucks have replaced the camels. Tourism brings in jobs, which is great, but it also puts a huge new strain on the limited water supply. And farming, just to feed your family, is being replaced by growing cash crops to sell to the wider world. And we can't forget about the other half of that traditional equation, the nomads. Their entire culture, nomadism, is built on the idea of constant movement. They travel with their herds of camels, goats, and sheep, expertly following the seasonal rains to find fresh pasture in a landscape that, to an outsider, looks completely barren. But today, that full-time nomadic lifestyle is becoming incredibly rare. Many groups, like the famous Tuareg people, are shifting to what's called semi-nomadism, or they're giving up the lifestyle altogether and settling down. And this creates huge challenges, because the incredible specialized skills needed to survive in the deep desert don't always translate to a modern, settled economy, leading to new and difficult social problems. And all of this leaves us right here, with a final and really important question. These are cultures that have survived for thousands of years through unbelievable resilience and a deep, profound connection to their environment. But as fresh water gets even scarcer and the pressures of our modern world just keep growing, what does the future actually hold for these ancient ways of life? It's definitely something to think about.